Hey there, dreamers. Welcome back to our channel. Before we drift into tonight's gentle story from the world of Phineas and Ferb, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see how far and wide our sleepy little community reaches. All right, without further ado, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. The Flynn Fletcher house was wrapped in the soft stillness of night. The kind of stillness that felt heavy and gentle all at once, as if the whole world had tucked itself under a blanket and decided to rest. The curtains in the living room swayed faintly in the midnight breeze, letting in slivers of moonlight that traced pale silver lines across the wooden floor. Outside, the crickets played their steady lullaby, and the quiet hum of summer air pressed against the walls like a sigh. In his little corner, curled neatly into the bed that the boys had set aside for him, Perry lay still. His fur glowed faintly under the moonlight, his tail resting against the edge of the blanket that Phineas had insisted would make his pet extra cozy. To any passing glance, he was simply sleeping a small teal platypus, breathing in slow rhythm with the night, his eyelids fluttering faintly as though he teetered between waking and dreams. But Perry was never only sleeping. Behind those half-closed eyes was a mind that never fully turned off. He lived two lives, carried two worlds, and balanced two sets of responsibilities, one as the quiet family pet, the other as the ever-watchful Agent P. Tonight, though, there was no call, no sudden buzz from his communicator, no hidden entrance sliding open, no voice assigning him a mission. Tonight the city slept just as soundly as the family inside this home, and Perry allowed himself the rare gift of stillness. From upstairs came the steady sound of Phineas's light snore, not too loud, but easy to recognize. It was a sound Perry had grown used to over the summers, the quiet exhale of a boy whose mind spent all day racing through impossible ideas and finally settled into dreams. Ferb's breathing was softer, almost imperceptible, like he had carried his calm nature into his sleep as well. From another room, Candace mumbled something under her breath, tangled up in her own dreamscape. Maybe she was still half-busting her brothers even in slumber. The whole house was alive with these tiny rhythms of sleep, each sound threaded into the other like instruments in a lullaby, a song that only Perry was awake to hear. He shifted just slightly, nestling deeper into the folds of his blanket. His muscles loosened in a way they rarely did, because even when resting, Perry often stayed tense, ready for the next call, the next emergency, the next scheme to foil. But tonight there was nothing to fight, nothing to rush toward, no chaos to stop. Tonight, he was not an agent. He was not a protector. He was simply Perry, and that was enough. The moon cast its glow across the room, and Perry's eyes followed the soft stretch of shadow across the floor. In the silence, memories floated gently to the surface. He thought of the day the Flynn Fletchers brought him home, the excited chatter of Phineas, the knowing smile of Ferb, the way Linda had knelt down to pat his head. It had been simple, ordinary, and yet extraordinary all at once. From the very beginning, they hadn't just seen him as a pet, they had welcomed him as family. And as the night deepened, that thought carried Perry into the next wave of calm. The city could wait until tomorrow. Doofenshmirtz could wait until tomorrow. For now, there was only the quiet house, the steady heartbeat of the night, and the warmth of belonging. Perry's head tilted ever so slightly, his small bill pressing against the blanket's edge. His body language to anyone else would have looked like nothing more than the shifting of a sleepy pet. But for Perry, it was an adjustment into greater comfort, a rare chance to let his guard down. In his secret life, there was no room for vulnerability. Every mission demanded quick reflexes, sharp focus, and constant readiness. Yet here, in the quiet safety of his home, Perry allowed himself the luxury of sinking fully into the calm around him. The clock in the hallway ticked softly, each sound carrying through the walls like a metronome guiding the household's collective breath. Occasionally, the wood of the old staircase gave a little groan, as if the house itself were settling into its own rest. These tiny noises were comforting rather than disruptive. They gave Perry the sense that the house was alive in its own way, standing guard alongside him, keeping its family safe through the night. Outside, the neighborhood shared in the stillness. Street lamps cast golden halos on the sidewalks, their light catching the edges of tree branches that swayed slowly in the breeze. A few moths flickered around the glow, darting in and out of the circle of light like dancers in a quiet performance. Beyond that, the stars stretched wide across the sky, endless and unhurried. Perry had seen those same stars countless times during late-night missions, when he leapt across rooftops or watched over the city. But tonight, they were simply stars' distant companions watching in silence, reminders that the world was vast and steady. Inside the walls of the Flynn Fletcher home, Perry's thoughts turned gently inward. He thought of Phineas's boundless excitement, the way the boy would always lean down to scratch behind his ears before rushing off into another invention. He thought of Ferb's quiet, knowing glances, the way his stillness mirrored Perry's own. He thought of Candace, whose hurried footsteps and determined energy filled the house with a kind of chaos Perry secretly admired. Each member of the family carried their own rhythm, their own quirks and imperfections, and Perry wove himself into their lives like a silent thread, holding them all together in ways they didn't even notice. There were times, on long missions, when Perry would catch himself thinking of this house, of this family. Even when leaping across rooftops in pursuit of another innator, he would sometimes imagine the sound of Phineas laughing or the warm smell of Linda's cooking drifting from the kitchen. It wasn't distraction. Perry never allowed himself to lose focus. It was more like an anchor, a reminder of why he fought at all. The city was his responsibility, yes, but this family was his heart. The room shifted with a draft, the curtain lifting softly in the breeze. Perry's ears twitched at the change, instinctive and alert. But nothing followed, no alarms, no threats, no danger. Only the faint scent of blooming flowers drifted in, reminding him of the garden Linda kept outside. Slowly, Perry's body eased again, letting the tension melt away. He was always ready to spring into action, yet in these rare nights of silence, he gave himself permission not to. His eyes half closed, he let the world blur just slightly. The voices of the day, Doofenshmirtz's theatrical monologues, the shouts of chaotic missions, the whirl of gadgets, faded into memory. What replaced them was the far gentler sound of night, the soft breathing of his family, the creak of the house, and the pulse of the earth itself humming steadily below him. Perry knew that when morning came, life would start again at full speed. The boys would be bursting with new ideas. Candace would be rushing to keep order, and somewhere across town, Doofenshmirtz would already be building another Inotor that required stopping. But tonight was different. Tonight was for stillness. Tonight was for remembering that even a secret agent was allowed moments of simple peace. And so he stayed where he was, curled tightly, listening to the heartbeat of the house as if it were his own. As the hours stretched deeper into the night, the house seemed to sink into an even heavier kind of silence, the sort that pressed gently against the ears until it became its own kind of song. Perry stirred faintly. not because of unease, but almost as if acknowledging that he alone was awake to witness this version of the world. The others dreamed on Phineas surely inventing wonders in his sleep. Ferb perhaps imagining great adventures. Candace likely locked in her endless quest to prove what she saw. But Perry, ever watchful, carried the quiet. There was comfort in knowing they trusted him without ever realizing why. To them, he was just their pet, a teal platypus with a calm face and loyal eyes. He had no need to speak, no need to reveal more, and that simplicity was its own form of sanctuary. In a life where he bore countless identities, secret gadgets, and hidden roles, Perry found peace in being seen only as Perry. The family did not demand explanations. They did not ask questions of him. They simply loved him as he was, and that was enough. The moonlight crawled slowly across the walls, changing the shapes of shadows as it moved. One long stretch of light landed across Perry's small bed, bathing him in a faint silver glow. It gave the illusion that he was part of the night itself, a creature of quiet, designed to belong to moments like these. His eyes flickered open for a moment, scanning the familiar outlines of the room, the chair by the window, the faint gleam of a picture frame, the steady outline of the door. All familiar, all safe. It struck Perry then, as it often did in these silent hours, how different his two worlds truly were. In one, he darted through hidden corridors, exchanged coded signals, and faced elaborate traps designed to test his every move. In the other, he lay here, surrounded by the innocence of family life, by the pure joy of children who believed summer could stretch forever. Somehow he belonged to both, and somehow both needed him in their own ways. His breathing slowed again as his thoughts settled. The balance between those worlds was delicate, yet Perry carried it with quiet pride. Few would ever know the effort it took to live between them, but he didn't need recognition. The laughter of the boys, the peace of the city, the safety of the home, those were reward enough. A faint rustle broke the stillness as the wind pressed against the trees outside, sending a cluster of leaves tumbling across the lawn. The sound was soft, almost soothing. Perry's ears twitched again, instinctively attentive. He waited for any other noise to follow the kind of noise that might signal an unexpected mission. But none came. Only the leaves settling again, returning to stillness as though they had never moved at all. Satisfied, Perry lowered his head onto the blanket once more. His tail shifted slightly as he tucked himself into a more comfortable shape, letting the last bits of the tension drain from his muscles. The city beyond could be unpredictable, but here now he was cocooned in security. His mind began to wander again, tracing small threads of memory. He thought of earlier that afternoon when Phineas had knelt beside him, speaking in his bright, excited way about the invention of the day. Perry hadn't understood every word. Phineas's ideas often leapt faster than explanation could keep up, but he had understood the heart behind it. Joy, discovery, and the thrill of creating. Ferb had stood quietly nearby, offering a steady hand to adjust or fix, his calm energy balancing his brother's boundless enthusiasm. And through it all, Perry had sat nearby, watching with silent approval. These thoughts, simple and familiar, warmed Perry as surely as the blanket did. And as he let his eyes drift closed once more, he carried those memories with him into the soft tide of rest that awaited. The night deepened. Outside, the street grew quieter still, as if the entire neighborhood had given itself fully to sleep. A single car passed now and then, its headlights sweeping gently across houses before fading into the distance. The world seemed smaller in those moments, wrapped tight in calm, and Perry could feel that calm seeping into him like water soaking into stone. The Flynn Fletcher house, though filled with the noise of invention by day, had become a sanctuary of rest by night. Perry listened to it carefully, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the light buzz of a lamp left on somewhere down the hall, the whisper of leaves brushing against the windows. Even the silence had a rhythm here, a living heartbeat that reminded him why this place mattered so much. It was not just a house. It was his home. His eyes opened halfway, adjusting to the dim glow of moonlight. He watched the shadow of the curtain swaying softly on the wall, and for a moment, it almost looked alive, like a dream moving lazily in the quiet. Perry's ears twitched once more, alert but relaxed. He was trained to notice everything, even when still, but there was nothing unusual to find tonight. Only ordinary life, in its most peaceful form. And that was exactly what he cherished. The day's memories brushed through his mind again, though they were no longer sharp or urgent. They came like gentle waves, the echo of Doofenshmirtz shouting dramatically about his newest plan, the rush of wind as Perry dashed across rooftops, the satisfying click of a gadget deactivating before harm could be done. All of it had already happened, tucked away into the past, resolved and finished. What remained now was silence, the reward for all those hours of hidden work. Perry shifted again, tucking his bill against the blanket. He could feel his body loosen entirely now, melting into the bed in a way he rarely allowed. His tail, usually held firm and ready, rested flat without tension. The role of Agent P slipped away like mist, leaving only Perry the Platypus, curled up in his safe corner, breathing slow and steady. A memory surfaced, softer than the others. He remembered the very first evening he had spent here, the way Phineas had leaned close to whisper, "You're perfect." The boy hadn't known then, couldn't have known, how much weight those words carried. Perry had been many things in his life, an agent, a fighter, a shadow no one recognized. But here, in this home, he was simply perfect as he was. Nothing more was required of him. No secrets, no missions, no proof, just Perry. The thought stayed with him like a lullaby as his eyes fluttered closed again. The sound of his family's breathing filled the space around him, steady and reassuring. The city beyond would always need watching. Missions would always return. But for now, those truths could wait until tomorrow. For tonight, Perry let the world shrink down to this single house, this single bed, this single moment of peace. And as he surrendered fully to rest, the shadows around him softened. The moonlight faded into dreamlike blur, and the guardian of Danville, its secret agent, its silent protector, became once again what his family always believed him to be, a beloved pet, fast asleep in the quiet of home. The hours of night drifted on, and the silence of the Flynn Fletcher home remained unbroken. Yet within that silence, Perry's thoughts began to wander in their usual way. He was still curled in his small bed, body at rest, but his mind carried him elsewhere, not into missions or alarms, but into the quiet reflection of who he was. Few creatures lived with such a dual existence. To the world inside this home, he was Perry the Platypus. Quiet, loyal, sometimes a little odd, but ultimately no different from any other pet. He ate from his bowl, dozed in the corner, followed the children through their wild adventures without ever drawing too much attention. The family accepted him as he was, never questioning, never suspecting. And yet, to another world hidden beneath the surface, he was Agent P, a force of calm precision, a protector of Danville, a secret hero whose skills kept countless dangers from touching those he loved. These two lives, so vastly different, could not have been more opposed, and yet somehow Perry balanced them both every single day. It was not always simple. There were mornings when he slipped back into the house after a long night of missions, heart still beating fast from rooftop leaps and daring escapes, only to find Phineas rubbing the sleep from his eyes, asking cheerfully if Perry wanted breakfast. There were afternoons when he had to pretend to nap while the boys built something extraordinary, even though his communicator hummed faintly, calling him away to confront Doofenshmirtz once again. And there were evenings, like this one, when the line between those lives blurred completely, when the safety of the family was directly tied to the quiet victories of Agent P. Perry had never complained, not once. He did not need recognition. He did not need applause. His reward was the simple knowledge that his two worlds remained in balance. The family never suspected a thing, which meant their lives remained untouched by danger. And Danville slept peacefully at night, unaware of the battles fought in the shadows to protect it. Still, there were moments when the weight of those identities pressed heavily on him. He thought of times when he had been seconds away from being discovered when a mission had overlapped too closely with Phineas and Ferb's creations, or when Doofenshmirtz's bumbling antics had spilled into the backyard. Somehow, always, Perry had managed to slip back into the role of just the pet before anyone noticed. But those close calls reminded him of how fragile the balance was. One misstep, one accident, and everything could change. And yet, even in those moments, Perry felt no resentment. He carried the responsibility with quiet dignity, as if it were as natural to him as breathing. He belonged to both worlds equally. He could not imagine giving one up for the other. His eyes fluttered open as these thoughts settled. He glanced toward the ceiling where the moonlight glowed faintly across the beams. His breathing stayed steady, unbroken, as if the rhythm itself kept him tethered to this balance. One breath for the family, one breath for the city. Inhale, exhale. Pet and agent, both halves of the same whole. What the family never knew was how often Agent P thought of them during missions. In the heat of a chase, while dodging lasers or disabling gadgets, Perry would sometimes recall Phineas's wide-eyed excitement, or Ferb's calm nods. Those memories were anchors, grounding him even in the most chaotic of moments. They reminded him of why his secret life mattered at all. Without them, the fight would have been meaningless. Tonight, with the house resting in peace, Perry found himself reflecting on that balance more deeply. Was he living two lives, or were both simply parts of the same truth? Perhaps he was not divided at all, but rather whole an agent whose greatest mission was not just saving the city, but preserving the innocence of the family who loved him. The thought warmed him in ways no blanket ever could. The night had not shifted much. The same soft hums and sighs filled the house, yet Perry felt as though the silence around him was listening, encouraging him to continue tracing his own thoughts. Balance, after all, was not only something he lived each day. It was something he constantly measured, weighed, and adjusted, like a finely tuned instrument. He remembered a morning not long ago when Phineas had invited him to test out one of the newest contraptions, a hover scooter powered by recycled soda cans. Perry had blinked, climbed aboard, and let them push him along, his face blank as always. Inside, though, he had been calculating the time, making sure his mission schedule aligned with the boys' play. When his watch eventually buzzed, he had hopped off casually, waddled toward the bushes, and slipped away to the hidden elevator that would whisk him underground. Moments later, he was leaping across Danville's skyline in full agent mode. The boys never noticed. To them, Perry was simply wandering off like pets often did. And when he returned, slightly dusty but pretending to yawn, they welcomed him back without question. To Perry, that was balance at its finest, never letting one world interfere with the other, even if it required constant care. But sometimes the balance wavered. There had been a day when Doofenshmirtz's Shrinkinator had accidentally zapped the very project Phineas and Ferb were working on. Perry had barely stopped the chaos in time, redirecting the beam before it struck the boys directly. For a brief moment, he had stood frozen, his two lives colliding in the most dangerous way. Yet somehow, as always, the children never pieced it together. Their invention appeared malfunctioned, and Perry returned moments later, his usual blank stare intact. The crisis passed, the secret safe once more. It was these close calls that made Perry realize how much of his existence relied on silence, not only the silence of secrecy, but the silence of restraint. He often wished he could reassure them with words to explain why he sometimes disappeared or how much he admired their brilliant minds, but he never could. His role demanded stillness, demanded quiet loyalty, and so he remained wordless, showing his devotion not through explanations, but through presence. Perry's eyes closed halfway as he thought about this. The balance was not always about grand missions and daring escapes. Sometimes it was as simple as knowing when to act and when to stay still, when to leap into danger and when to curl up quietly at the foot of Phineas's bed. Both actions were equally important. Both defined who he was. There was comfort in that truth. The agent and the pet were not rivals inside him. They were companions, each shaping the other. His family gave him the reason to fight, and his agency gave him the strength to protect. Without one, the other would be incomplete. Perry understood this instinctively, as though his very heartbeat had been divided into two steady rhythms that always found a way to harmonize. The wind outside shifted softly, brushing against the window with a hollow sigh. Perry listened, then nestled deeper into the fabric beneath him. He imagined the city beyond those walls, the streets quiet, the lights dimming one by one, families in other houses drifting to sleep just as his own had, all of them unknowingly carried by the balance he maintained. It was not glory that held the city steady, not recognition, but the hidden consistency of a platypus who lived two lives and allowed neither to falter. For Perry, that was enough, more than enough. As the hours pressed on, Perry's dreams hovered somewhere between waking thought and memory. He had not yet slipped fully into deep sleep. Instead, his mind wandered, unspooling long threads of his double life and weaving them into quiet reflections. He thought of Doofenshmirtz, the unlikely constant in his agent work. Their battles had always carried a strange rhythm, one that no other villain could replicate. For all the shouting and outlandish inventions, Perry knew the truth. Their skirmishes were rarely about harm. They were rituals, almost rehearsals, repeating in endless loops. Doofenshmirtz would plot, Perry would intervene, and somehow balance was restored before the day's end. And yet, even in those absurd clashes, Perry carried the weight of his two lives. He would engage fully as Agent P, flipping, leaping, countering, but always with the silent reminder tucked into his thoughts. The family must never know. That single truth held more power over him than any mission order ever could. There had been evenings when Doofenshmirtz had nearly crossed into their backyard, his inventions sputtering smoke that trailed dangerously close to the boys' latest project. Perry's response had always been faster, sharper, more urgent in those moments. Not because the Alka demanded it, but because Perry would allow nothing, not even the silliest contraption, to disturb the fragile world of Phineas, Ferb, and their family. Protecting Danville was his duty. Protecting the family was his heart. The line between those two responsibilities blurred so often that Perry no longer tried to separate them. He could recall countless instances where a mission seemed finished, the day saved, only for him to stay a little longer, watching quietly from a rooftop as the boys tested their inventions below. He would leave only once he was certain they were safe, blending back into the shadows before returning home to them as if nothing had happened. That was balance, a life in plain sight and yet hidden entirely. He breathed out slowly, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, the old clock chimed the half-hour in muted tones, its sound muffled by distance and sleep. Perry's ears twitched once, then stilled. The clock marked time, but to Perry, time was measured differently. It was not in minutes or hours, but in moments, when the balance held steady. Like tonight? The peace in the house was a victory, quiet though it seemed. It meant no alarms had sounded, no rooftops had required crossing, no gadgets had misfired to threaten the calm. It meant Perry could remain here, watching over them without moving at all. He felt almost invisible, a guardian who existed between breaths, ensuring that the night stretched on unbroken. In the gentle dark, Perry thought about what it meant to belong to two lives. It was not a burden to him. Though it demanded vigilance, it also gave him purpose. Most creatures lived a single truth. Perry had been given two, and he cherished them both as gifts. He tucked his head against the blanket, the faint scent of fabric softener filling his senses. The weight of his eyelids grew heavier, but still he lingered at the edges of sleep, savoring the thoughts that swam gently in his mind. Was he a pet pretending to be an agent, or an agent pretending to be a pet? The question had no real answer. Perhaps, he decided, he was neither pretending. He was wholly both Perry the Platypus, indivisible, complete. The thought settled warmly in his chest. The night was deep now, the world beyond the Flynn Fletcher home almost entirely still. The occasional rustle of a branch against the window or the far-off bark of a dog punctuated the silence, but nothing stirred within these walls. The family slept soundly, and Perry, though still hovering in that gentle state between rest and thought, felt the same serenity wrapping around him like a cloak. Balance. The word returned to him again and again. It was not just something he practiced. It was something that defined him. Without it, his two worlds would collapse into chaos. With it, both could flourish. He remembered the small ways this balance shaped his days. The way he would pretend to stumble clumsily into the kitchen to keep up the appearance of being just a pet, even though his body was trained with the precision of an acrobat. The way he would feign indifference to the boys' wild inventions, though inside he marveled at their boundless creativity. He wore the mask of simplicity for them, not because he had to, but because it allowed them to live freely. His silence was not emptiness, it was protection. Perry thought about how easy it would be to lose that balance if he ever revealed the truth. Phineas's curiosity would bloom instantly. Ferb's calm gaze would sharpen, and questions would follow questions Perry could never answer fully. Their innocence would fracture, and the playful chaos of summer days might never feel the same again. That was a reality Perry would never allow, and so he remained steady, living both lives in parallel. There were times, of course, when he wished for the impossible, a way to merge them, to exist openly as both protector and pet. But such thoughts were fleeting, like clouds drifting across the moon. What mattered was what was, not what might be. The family loved him as they knew him, and that love was enough to sustain the other life he lived. The moonlight thinned as a faint layer of clouds drifted overhead, dimming the silver glow across the room. Shadows deepened, soft and shapeless, and Perry's breathing slowed further. He was nearly asleep now, the last of his reflections dissolving into the quiet. Yet before his mind surrendered fully to dreams, he clung to a single truth. Balance was not just the task he performed. It was the heart of who he was. Pet and agent. Silent companion and secret hero. Both halves of one being, held together not by duty alone, but by devotion. Devotion to his mission, yes, but more importantly, to his family. And as sleep finally claimed him, Perry's last awareness was not of rooftops or gadgets, not of codes or alarms. It was of the warm comfort of home, the steady breathing of those he loved, and the quiet certainty that by holding two lives in balance, he had given both worlds exactly what they needed. The night would continue its steady course, and morning would come, with new adventures, new inventions, and perhaps another call to duty. But for now, balance had been achieved, and Perry Protector, Pet, and Platypus drifted peacefully into dreams. The night continued its gentle song, each hour melting into the next with barely a ripple. Perry stirred once, stretching his limbs beneath the blanket, before settling again into stillness. His mind, though lulled by the rhythm of the house, began to drift into another current of thought, not about balance this time, but about the invisible threads of connection that tied him to others. Friendship. It was an odd word for a platypus who could never speak it aloud, yet Perry felt its truth more deeply than most. His life had been shaped by bonds that required no explanations, no words at all. They were quiet friendships, formed in glances, in gestures, in the silent loyalty of being present. He thought first, naturally, of Phineas and Ferb. To the boys, he was a pet, a companion who never judged their wild inventions, who always sat nearby no matter how strange or impossible their projects seemed. They had given him a place in their lives without question, without condition. In their eyes, Perry belonged simply because he was there. There was no greater gift than that. Phineas's constant cheer, his endless optimism, filled the house with energy that Perry often carried with him on missions. Ferb's quiet steadiness mirrored Perry's own silence, as though the two understood something unspoken about watching the world without needing to comment. Their friendship to him was not loud or obvious, but it was steady, reliable, a force as grounding as the earth itself. He thought, too, of Candace. She often overlooked him, caught up in her own whirl of schemes and attempts to expose her brother's antics. And yet, Perry knew she cared in her own way. She would sometimes pause to scratch the top of his head absent-mindedly while pacing, or murmur to him as though he were the only one who could understand her frustrations. He never responded, of course, but in those moments, Perry felt the weight of her trust. She confided in him without realizing it, and that, too, was a form of friendship. Even Linda and Lawrence, the parents, played their part in this web of connection. They provided him with food, shelter, warmth, and simply because he was a pet, but because they had accepted him into the family with the same care they gave their children. Perry sometimes wondered if they noticed more than they admitted, if they sensed his unusual intelligence in small ways. But whether they did or not, their kindness was genuine. It asked for nothing in return. Friendship, Perry realized, was not only about shared adventures. It was about presence, about showing up, again and again, quietly and consistently. And that was something he had always known how to do. His thoughts stretched further, drifting to the strangest of friendships. the one he shared with the Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz. Enemy on the surface, yes. Adversary by design. Yet beneath the constant battles and comical inventions, Perry felt an odd bond with him. They spent more time together than many friends ever did. Their clashes were routine, almost ritualistic, and in that rhythm lay a peculiar form of companionship. He would never admit it, and certainly Doofenshmirtz would never believe it, but Perry knew that in some ways they relied on each other. Doofenshmirtz had someone to thwart his misguided plans, and Perry had someone to oppose, a challenge that gave structure to his secret life. They balanced one another, not unlike friends locked in a perpetual game neither wished to end. The thought made Perry's chest warm with quiet amusement. Friendship took many forms, and his life was proof of that. Some bonds were as simple as a hand reaching down to pat his head. Others were as strange as an enemy who talked endlessly while Perry waited for the right moment to strike. Yet all of them, in their own way, gave his life meaning. As his eyes grew heavier again, Perry let those reflections linger. To live two lives was difficult. To live them alone would have been unbearable. But Perry was never alone. Invisible threads connected him to so many hearts, and even if none of them knew the full truth of who he was, the bonds they shared were real. And in the quiet of night, those friendships were enough to make the world feel whole. The shadows in the room shifted gently as the moonlight thinned, filtered through drifting clouds. Perry lay still, his breathing steady, but his thoughts moved on, exploring the many shapes friendship had taken in his life. Friendship with Phineas and Ferb was the simplest to name, yet it was also layered with more meaning than most could see. Phineas, with his unshakable cheer, treated Perry as though he were a partner in every invention, even if Perry only sat nearby with that blank stare of his. Whenever Phineas spoke to him, Perry listened, not with the ears of a mere pet, but with the heart of a friend who understood. He admired the boy's kindness, his curiosity, and his ability to see potential in everything around him. Ferb was different. Ferb did not speak often, but Perry sensed something familiar in that silence. It was not emptiness, but strength. Ferb noticed details others overlooked. He often met Perry's gaze in a way that suggested understanding beyond words. Though Ferb did not know his secret, Perry sometimes wondered if the boy sensed more than he let on. Their friendship was quiet, steady, built not on words, but on the recognition of what went unsaid. Candace brought a different kind of connection. She often stormed through the house in frustration, but even in her busiest moments, she acknowledged Perry. She vented to him as if he were her audience, and he accepted it calmly, never interrupting. Sometimes, when her schemes failed and her shoulders slumped, she would sit beside him, her hand brushing absent-mindedly across his fur. Perry knew she found comfort in those moments, and though she never realized it, he offered it willingly. Friendship could be as small as being there for someone when they didn't even know they needed you. Linda and Lawrence added their own quiet layers of care. Linda's gentle pats and soft reminders, "Don't forget to feed Perry," were tokens of love, steady and grounding. Lawrence, with his curious stories and occasional chuckle at Perry's antics, treated him like a true part of the family. They gave without asking, and Perry, though unable to thank them in words, carried gratitude in every silent glance. And then there was Doofenshmirtz. Their friendship was unlike any other, a paradox wrapped in chaos. By all accounts, they were enemies, yet time and again, Perry found himself pausing in the middle of battle to listen to the man's rambling monologues. He knew the details of Doofenshmirtz's childhood, his complaints about bratwurst, his frustrations with the world. Perry could have ended most of their battles quickly, but instead, he allowed the conversations to stretch. Somewhere deep inside, he recognized that Doofenshmirtz needed someone to hear him. Perry became that someone, silently, reliably. It was strange, perhaps even absurd, but there was a truth in it. Enemies or not, they shared a bond. Without Perry, Doofenshmirtz's schemes would have gone unchecked. Without Doofenshmirtz, Perry's days would have lacked their peculiar rhythm. Together they formed a cycle, one that looked like conflict from the outside, but which felt, to Perry, remarkably like companionship. Friendship, Perry realized, was not always about harmony. Sometimes it was about balance, about two very different lives orbiting around each other in a way that gave them both meaning. The thought settled deeply in him. His life had never been simple, and his friendships reflected that complexity. Yet no matter how unusual they seemed, each one mattered. Each one carried its own quiet importance, weaving into the fabric of his days until he could not imagine life without them. Perry shifted slightly, nestling further into the warmth of his blanket. His eyelids fluttered heavy but resisting, as though his mind wanted to hold on to these reflections just a little longer. Friendship was not loud in his world, not filled with grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It was subtle, steady, as calm as the night itself. And that, Perry thought, made it all the more precious. The night had settled into its deepest hours now, when even the city itself seemed to sleep. Streetlights hummed faintly outside, and the neighborhood was wrapped in stillness. Perry's thoughts lingered in that hush, exploring friendships that extended beyond the walls of this house. Though he could never reveal himself fully, Perry's secret life had introduced him to connections far beyond the Flynn Fletcher family. There was Carl, the eager intern at Oka, always brimming with questions and enthusiasm. Perry often listened in silence as Carl rattled on about gadgets or asked to shadow him on missions. Though Perry rarely responded, he appreciated the boy's admiration. It reminded him that even in the hidden corners of his world, bonds could form. Then there was Major Monogram, stern, structured, commanding, but beneath the gruff exterior lay a steady trust in Perry's abilities. Monogram never doubted him, never second-guessed his choices. For an agent who worked in shadows, that trust was itself a friendship of sorts. Perry knew that while orders came from above, there was always respect in them, and that respect carried weight. Friendship, he realized, came in many shades: admiration, trust, reliance, care. It could be loud like Phineas's excitement, quiet like Ferb's gaze, or disguised as duty like Monogram's briefings. Yet all of them fed into the same truth: Perry was never truly alone. He thought again of Doofenshmirtz. Their relationship was harder to name, and yet it remained impossible to ignore. For every ridiculous innoter, for every scheme that threatened chaos, there was always a pause, that moment, when Doofenshmirtz rambled about his past, his disappointments, his longing to be seen. Perry never rolled his eyes, never turned away. He listened. He knew that behind the villain's loud voice was simply someone who wanted to be understood. It struck Perry that perhaps friendship was not about labels at all. It was not about who counted as family or who wore the mask of an enemy. Friendship was about presence, about being there time and again, no matter the role. And in that sense, Perry had more friends than most would ever guess. He let his thoughts drift back to the children. Summer days with Phineas and Ferb building roller coasters or time machines often ended with the two flopping into the grass, exhausted but laughing, while Perry sat quietly at their side. They never needed him to speak. His being there was enough. He was the silent constant in their adventures, the one piece of stability in their ever-changing world of ideas. And then there were nights like this, when the inventions were dismantled, the chaos tidied away, and only the warmth of family remained. Perry cherished those just as deeply. They were the quiet reminders that friendship was not only about excitement, it was also about stillness, about being together when nothing needed to be done at all. Perry's breathing slowed. His mind felt heavier now, drifting closer to dreams. Yet he held tightly to these reflections, savoring them like soft embers in the dark. His life, with all its secrets and balancing acts, was held together not just by duty, but by connection, by friendships that looked ordinary on the surface but glowed brightly in his heart. Without them, he realized, the double life would feel like an endless burden. With them, it felt instead like a purpose, a calling shaped not by loneliness, but by quiet bonds that asked for nothing in return. And so Perry closed his eyes once more, warmed by the invisible threads that wove him to others, threads of loyalty, trust, and companionship. The clock ticked softly in the background, its rhythm almost blending with the sound of Perry's steady breathing. Night stretched long and gentle, as though time itself had slowed to let his thoughts wander just a little further. Perry's reflections turned now toward the meaning of his place in all these friendships. He was, in many ways, an observer, a listener, a quiet supporter. He never sought the spotlight. He didn't need recognition or praise. His reward was simply in being present, in knowing that the lives around him were brighter because he had been there. It was not always easy. There were moments when his silence felt heavy, when he wished he could speak openly to the family about what he did, who he truly was. He sometimes imagined what Phineas might say if he learned the truth. Likely, the boy would be overjoyed, peppering him with questions about gadgets and missions. Ferb would probably just nod knowingly, as though he had suspected all along. Candace might be stunned into silence before trying to add "my pet is a secret agent" to her long list of things to prove to her mom. And yet, Perry knew that revealing the truth would change everything. The simplicity of their trust, the innocence of their bond, might be lost under the weight of secrets and danger. So he chose silence. He chose the role of the quiet friend, the loyal guardian, the silent anchor. But silence never meant distance. Perry had learned that friendship did not demand grand gestures or endless words. Sometimes it was strongest in the simplest of things, a steady presence, a shared moment, a hand reaching out when another stumbled. As he thought of this, his mind painted quiet pictures. Phineas resting in the backyard hammock after a long day, Ferb sketching quietly by lamplight, Candace pacing in her room but pausing to scratch Perry's head absent-mindedly. Each image carried the same thread. They trusted him, relied on him, cared for him, even if they didn't know everything about him. And even Doofenshmirtz drifted into these reflections. The so-called villain, who was more lonely than dangerous, had found in Perry something resembling companionship. Their battles were never cruel, their encounters often ending with a sigh, a laugh, or a shared moment of absurdity. It wasn't friendship in the traditional sense, but it was something close, something fragile, and perhaps even more important because of its unlikeliness. The more Perry thought about it, the more he realized that friendship wasn't confined by roles at all. Family, foe, superior, intern, none of it mattered. What mattered was connection, the invisible bond that tied lives together in ways words could never fully explain. As the night deepened, Perry's reflections softened. He understood now more than ever that his double life was not divided by walls, but stitched together by these connections. Each person who crossed his path left an imprint. Each relationship, no matter how fleeting or strange, added warmth to his days and nights. And in this moment, as he lay in the stillness of a sleeping house, Perry felt a quiet gratitude. Gratitude for the laughter he had witnessed, the trust he had earned, the odd friendships he had stumbled into. Gratitude for a life that, though secret, was never truly lonely. His eyes grew heavier. Thoughts blurred into dreams. But before sleep claimed him, one last truth settled firmly in his heart. Friendship is not about being seen. It is about being felt. And in that truth, Perry found peace. The house was asleep. The steady hush of slumber filled the walls, and Perry rose quietly from his corner, padding across the soft carpet. His small frame moved with practiced grace, not disturbing a single creak of the floorboards. He slipped through the secret passage hidden in the simple furniture of the room, vanishing from the ordinary life of a pet into the shadowy corridors of a hidden world. These moments were the essence of Perry's silent adventures. There was no fanfare, no announcement, no one to notice the transformation from pet to agent. The stillness of the night carried him into a life of purpose, where even the faintest sounds, the click of a keypad, the whir of hidden machinery seemed louder than words. The tunnel opened into the Osea base, and Perry was greeted by the familiar hum of screens and equipment. The headquarters never slept. Glowing panels lit the walls, and though few agents were visible at this hour, the quiet activity reassured Perry. He was part of something bigger, something secret and steady, hidden beneath the surface of ordinary lives. Major Monogram's face flickered onto a large screen, his voice carrying the usual firmness. "Agent P, we've got another situation. Dr. Doofenshmirtz is at it again. Reports indicate he's been working late into the night on a new device. We need you to keep an eye on it." Perry responded with his trademark trill and a crisp salute. No words were needed. They never were. With his mission received, he stepped onto the launch platform, the quiet whoosh of hidden mechanisms propelling him into the cool night air. The city stretched beneath him, its lights shimmering like scattered stars. Rooftops formed a silent maze, and Perry landed smoothly, his movements fluid and calm. Every step was deliberate, every pause filled with alert listening. This was his other life, a life no one in the house above could ever imagine. As he made his way toward Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated, Perry allowed himself a small reflection. These nightly missions weren't simply battles of hero against villain. They were rituals, almost like a dance performed in silence. The chase, the confrontation, the inevitable twists, it all carried a rhythm, one that both he and Doofenshmirtz knew by heart. At the tower, the lights were still on. Perry scaled the walls effortlessly, slipping through a half-open balcony door. Inside, Doofenshmirtz was muttering to himself, tools scattered around him. "Almost finished. I just need one more adjustment." He didn't notice Perry at first, too absorbed in his invention. Perry observed quietly, blending into the shadows. He always watched before he acted, studying the invention, the wires, the blinking lights. Tonight's machine looked like some sort of forget-it-inator, judging by the scribbled notes on the desk. Doofenshmirtz muttered, "Yes, yes. With this, people will finally forget all the times they ignored me as a child. Then they'll know what it feels like." At that, Perry made his entrance. A sharp sound announced his presence, and Doofenshmirtz spun around, startled. "Perry the Platypus? What are you doing here so quietly? Couldn't you at least slam a door, give me a little warning? You sneaky little—" He sighed dramatically. "Well, I suppose this is how it always goes." And so began their nightly exchange. Doofenshmirtz talked, Perry listened. The villain gestured wildly, explaining his invention in unnecessary detail, while Perry prepared his plan in silence. There was a strange comfort in this pattern, an unspoken understanding that each knew their role. With precise timing, Perry struck. A well-placed move disabled the Inator's core, sending sparks across the lab. Doofenshmirtz let out his usual exasperated cry, half annoyed, half resigned. "Oh, come on. I didn't even get to test it this time." But as the smoke cleared, Doofenshmirtz simply slumped into a chair, looking oddly tired. Perry tilted his head, curious. For a moment, the two sat there in silence, the tension gone. It wasn't victory or defeat, just a pause in the endless cycle. These were the parts of his silent adventures that Perry carried with him most deeply. It wasn't the action or the gadgets, but the quiet moments afterward when the city was still and even enemies seemed like weary companions. It was in these silences that Perry's two worlds touched the secret life of duty and the quiet longing for connection. And with that thought, Perry slipped back into the night, unseen and unheard, his adventure fading once more into the gentle hush of the sleeping city. The rooftops welcomed Perry back with their cool stone surfaces, the city beneath him glowing faintly under the silver wash of the moon. He moved like a shadow, silent and sure, gliding over ledges and slipping past chimneys. Few people were awake at this hour, and those who were never looked up to notice the small figure darting across the skyline. That was the way Perry preferred it. His adventures were meant to be unseen, carried out in whispers instead of applause. Landing softly on a slanted roof, Perry paused to catch the rhythm of the night. A dog barked in the distance, the sound echoing briefly before fading. A neon sign flickered lazily above a late-night diner. Somewhere far below, a car rolled by, its headlights slicing the dark for only a moment. These were the details Perry memorized on his nightly paths, and tiny reminders that the city was alive even in stillness. His communicator buzzed faintly, just a brief check-in from OWCA. Perry responded with a quick chirp before continuing on his way. He never lingered too long in one place. Movement kept him hidden, and hidden was where he thrived. As he traveled, Perry thought about the odd consistency of these silent adventures. Night after night, the cycle repeated. Doofenshmirtz would invent, Perry would intervene, and the balance of the city would be restored before sunrise. Yet despite the familiarity, there was always a new detail, a fresh invention, a stranger plan, or a moment that shifted the tone of the evening. No two missions ever felt identical. Oh, he remembered one night when Doofenshmirtz's invention was nothing more than a giant balloon shaped like his own face, designed to hover above the city as a declaration of importance. It had been absurd, almost laughable. Yet Perry had carried out the mission with the same quiet diligence as always. Another night, the invention had been surprisingly dangerous, something that could have caused real harm. That mission had ended with sparks, alarms, and a chase through collapsing scaffolding. Both nights, though vastly different, had ended the same way, with the city safe and the morning undisturbed. What struck Perry most was how invisible these efforts remained. By dawn, the inventions were dismantled, the damage undone, and the people of the tri-state area went about their day none the wiser. The children played, the parents worked, and not one of them knew how close they had come to chaos the night before. There was a strange comfort in that anonymity. Perry didn't need thanks. He didn't need recognition. In fact, he preferred the quiet knowledge that life above remained untouched because he had acted in silence. His victories were measured not in applause, but in the laughter of children the next morning. The ordinary routines left intact. Still, there were nights when Perry wondered how different things might feel if he could share even a glimpse of this life. Not the dangers, not the endless battles, but the beauty hidden in silence. The moonlit rooftops, the thrill of solving puzzles in the dark, the satisfaction of seeing a scheme unravel without anyone noticing. These were treasures he held close, knowing they could never be spoken aloud. He stopped at the edge of a tall building, crouching low as he scanned the horizon. The faint glow of Doofenshmirtz's tower still shimmered in the distance, a crooked beacon of his nightly tasks. Perry tilted his head, watching for a long moment. The night was not finished. There were always more turns in the path, more quiet mysteries waiting. And so, without hesitation, Perry leapt forward, his small figure cutting through the cool air. Another silent adventure was unfolding, another thread in the endless tapestry of nights. To the world, nothing was happening at all. But to Perry, every soundless step carried meaning, every mission a reminder that even the smallest guardian could hold the balance of countless lives in his steady, wordless hands. The night stretched on, deep and unbroken, the stars above scattered like faint jewels across a velvet sky. Perry moved with the rhythm of the darkness, slipping into alleys, vaulting over fences, and blending so seamlessly into shadows that he seemed part of the night itself. His adventures were not the noisy kind of tales told in stories. They were lived in whispers, subtle movements, and moments so fleeting that only he would remember them. Tonight's path took him toward the industrial district, a place of quiet warehouses and empty lots. The air here always carried a different weight cooler, sharper, touched with the faint scent of machinery and steel. It was often here that Doofenshmirtz tested his inventions, away from the eyes of the city. Perry knew these streets well. He had traced them countless times, yet each return carried its own unpredictability. As Perry crept along a rusted fire escape, his sharp eyes caught the flicker of strange lights through a warehouse window. He slipped inside soundlessly, landing amidst the shadows of towering crates. There, at the far end, stood Doofenshmirtz, tinkering with yet another bizarre contraption. This one had long antennae, blinking red panels, and a dramatic label taped to the side. Echo in Otter. Doofenshmirtz's voice echoed across the empty space as he muttered, "Yes, yes, this will be perfect. With this, every time someone ignores me, their words will echo endlessly until they realize how important I am. Nobody can dismiss me then." He chuckled to himself, too caught up in his idea to notice the figure crouched silently nearby. Perry watched closely, his gaze calm but alert. He studied the layout of wires, the way the machine pulsed with unstable energy. Timing was everything. To act too soon was to give Doofenshmirtz time to counter. To wait too long risked the invention reaching full power. And so Perry remained still, a statue of patience, while Doofenshmirtz rambled and adjusted knobs. At last, the moment came. Perry leapt from the shadows, a swift blur in the dim light. Doofenshmirtz shrieked, nearly dropping his wrench. "Perry the Platypus! Honestly, how do you always know when to show up? Do you have my place bugged? Do you—" "Oh, never mind." Their silent duel unfolded in the familiar rhythm of their encounters. Doofenshmirtz flailed dramatically, swinging tools that missed by wide margins, while Perry responded with precise, quiet movements. A twist of a wire here, a quick kick there, and the echo initor sputtered with sparks before collapsing into harmless smoke. Doofenshmirtz groaned, falling to his knees in exaggerated despair. "Oh, come on. I worked so hard on this one. Do you have any idea how many batteries I went through?" His voice echoed slightly in the cavernous warehouse, as though mocking his own invention. Perry simply tilted his head, offering no sound, no explanation. He didn't need to. His silence was its own answer, his calm gaze a reminder that this cycle was never about destruction, but about balance. And then, as always, came a quiet pause. Doofenshmirtz sat down heavily on a crate, his shoulders slumping. You know, Perry the Platypus, sometimes I wonder why I keep trying. It's not like I ever win. Maybe I just like the company. His words drifted into the shadows, softer now, almost confessional. Perry stood still, listening. He didn't move to leave just yet. These were the moments he understood most deeply, when silence said more than words. He couldn't offer comfort with speech, but his presence, steady and unyielding, was its own kind of reply. Doofenshmirtz sighed, waving a hand. Go on, then. You've already ruined tonight's plan. I'll try again tomorrow. There was no bitterness in his voice, only weary resignation. Perry lingered one heartbeat longer before slipping back into the darkness, his figure vanishing as quietly as he had arrived. The city awaited, rooftops stretching endlessly into the night. As he bounded across beams and wires, Perry reflected that these silent adventures were never truly about winning or losing. They were about the spaces between the fleeting moments of stillness, the unspoken connections, the way a night could carry both conflict and companionship without ever breaking its calm. The stars above glimmered faintly, and Perry's journey continued. The night had thinned into its quietest hour, when even the city itself seemed to breathe more softly. Street lamps glowed dimly along empty sidewalks, and the hush of stillness wrapped around every building. Perry perched on the edge of a rooftop, a silhouette small against the vast sky. He had completed his mission. The Echo Initor lay in sparks and scraps behind him, but his night was not yet finished. His silent adventures were never just about stopping inventions. They were about the journey between those moments, the spaces where reflection and purpose met. From his vantage point, he watched as a few lights blinked in windows far below. Perhaps someone was awake finishing a book, or a baker was preparing the morning's bread. The thought comforted him. Just as he worked unseen to guard the city, so too did countless others carry out quiet tasks that kept the world turning. It reminded him that silence was not emptiness. Silence was full of lives, full of meaning, full of stories unfolding in the dark. He rose and began moving again, hopping lightly across rooftops. His path was untraceable, known only to him, a web of shortcuts and hidden ways. Along the way, he passed a rooftop garden, the plants glistening faintly with dew. He paused for a moment, brushing a leaf with his paw. Even here, in the city's steel heart, life found its way to bloom in stillness. Perry admired that resilience. It mirrored his own thriving quietly, unnoticed by most, but strong nonetheless. As he continued, his thoughts drifted back to the Flynn Fletcher household. By now, Phineas and Ferb were fast asleep, dreaming perhaps of tomorrow's invention or adventure. Candace would be curled under her blanket, lost in dreams of her own victories and struggles. Their mother and father, too, would be resting, unaware of the watchful guardian who slipped in and out of their home. Perry smiled inwardly. Protecting that peace was the truest purpose of his nightly work. He thought again of Doofenshmirtz. Their battles always ended the same way, but Perry knew they weren't meaningless. Behind the chaos and clumsy schemes, there was a man who, in his own peculiar way, longed for connection. Perry's silence had become part of that connection, a steady presence that Doofenshmirtz could rely on even if he would never admit it. Perhaps these nightly duels were not just about foiling evil, but about offering companionship to someone who needed it most. The city clock chimed faintly in the distance. Dawn was still hours away, but its promise lingered at the edges of the night. Perry felt the weight of time, the gentle reminder that soon the world above would stir. His adventures, unseen and unspoken, would fade once again into the quiet folds of memory. By morning, no one would know the paths he had crossed, the battles he had fought, the silences he had shared. And yet, that was how it was meant to be. As he approached the hidden entrance back into the Flynn Fletcher home, Perry slowed. The world behind this door was different. Here he was not an agent, but a pet, not a guardian of secrets, but a quiet companion. The shift was seamless now, second nature, but it always reminded him of how vast his life truly was. One foot in shadow, one in light, one in action, one in rest. He slipped inside quietly, his form disappearing into the ordinary corners of the house. The hum of the alka faded. The whispers of rooftops and echoes of machines dissolved into stillness. Perry padded softly to his familiar spot, curling up in silence once more. As his eyes closed, he carried the night's reflections with him, the rooftops, the inventions, the fleeting words of Doofenshmirtz, the unseen life of the city. They were all threads in the tapestry of his silent adventures, weaving meaning into every night. For Perry, silence was not emptiness. Silence was where duty lived, where friendship breathed, where purpose was found. And as he drifted into sleep, he knew tomorrow would bring another night, another mission, another silent adventure waiting in the shadows. The night unfolded slowly, wrapping Danville in a blanket of stillness. The streets that had been full of chatter, laughter, and invention just hours ago now lay quiet under the glow of the street lamps. Windows flickered with the soft lights of families winding down, but gradually, one by one, those lights dimmed. Soon only the faint hum of the city remained, like a heartbeat hidden beneath the quiet surface. Perry stirred from his spot in the Flynn Fletcher home. He opened his eyes with calm precision, blinking once before rising to his feet. The house was asleep. Every creak, every sigh of the settling walls told him so. He stretched silently and padded toward his hidden passage. It was time to begin again. His journeys each night were more than missions. They were pilgrimages across the familiar corners of Danville, a watchful survey of the lives he quietly protected. No one asked him to do this, and no one knew he did. Yet Perry felt the responsibility as surely as the moonlight guided him. To watch over the city was to care for the people who filled it, whether they knew his name or not. He emerged onto a rooftop. The city stretched wide before him. From up here, Danville was a quilt of neighborhoods stitched together by winding streets and glowing windows. Perry paused for a moment, letting the stillness settle into him. His gaze softened. This was his city, his charge, and though his presence would never be recognized, it mattered deeply that he was here. Moving swiftly but silently, Perry leapt across rooftops, surveying. In one neighborhood, he noticed the gentle flicker of a lamp still burning in a child's bedroom. Perhaps someone had fallen asleep with a book in hand. In another street, the sound of distant laughter floated from a house where family board games had run late. These small traces of life brought Perry quiet satisfaction. To him, they were reminders of why he did what he did. His path carried him toward the town square, where the fountain gurgled faintly even at this hour. The benches stood empty, the shops dark. But Perry could almost hear the echoes of daytime bustle, the children chasing each other around the fountain, the vendors calling out cheerfully, the life that made Danville more than just a city. He padded softly along the edge of the square, scanning for movement. The stillness reassured him. Tonight, all was safe here. He turned next toward the park, where the trees swayed gently in the night breeze. Lanterns glowed along the winding paths, their light catching the ripples of a pond at the center. Perry perched beneath a tree for a moment, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the water. It was peaceful here, but he never let his guard drop entirely. He knew that even in places of calm, surprises could rise. A strange contraption abandoned, a faint hum of machinery signs that Doofenshmirtz or some other schemer had been at work. But tonight there was nothing out of place, only the stillness of the park, breathing in harmony with the night. As Perry moved on, he thought about how much of Danville he carried with him. To others, it might just be a town on a map. To him, it was alive with stories. Every street corner had a memory. Every rooftop carried the imprint of past missions. He remembered sprinting across the train station to dismantle a stop-annoying-noise-inator. He recalled gliding through the marketplace when Doofenshmirtz's balloon parade had gone awry. Each place held its own quiet tale of balance restored. But it wasn't just about stopping trouble. It was about the watching itself. Perry understood that guardianship wasn't only about action. It was also about presence. His silent patrols were reminders that someone cared, that even when the city slept, its safety mattered to someone. That was the essence of his calling. The clock tower struck midnight, its sound rolling gently across the rooftops. Perry paused on a ledge, ears alert, eyes steady. Midnight was a turning point, the world shifting deeper into slumber. He let the sound wash over him, another marker in his endless routine of nights. Each chime reminded him that time moved steadily, but his vigil did not waver. From here he could see the Flynn Fletcher home, standing quietly among the others. A soft glow from one upstairs window told him that perhaps someone had left a nightlight on. Perry's gaze softened. That was his anchor, the family who trusted him without knowing how far his guardianship stretched. Watching over Danville was an extension of watching over them. If the city was safe, then the children could wake to another day of carefree invention and laughter. With a final glance, Perry slipped into the shadows again, continuing his patrol. The night was long, and Danville was vast. His silent watch was far from over. The night unfolded slowly, wrapping Danville in a blanket of stillness. The streets that had been full of chatter, laughter, and invention just hours ago now lay quiet under the glow of the street lamps. Windows flickered with the soft lights of families winding down, but gradually, one by one, those lights dimmed. Soon only the faint hum of the city remained, like a heartbeat hidden beneath the quiet surface. Perry stirred from his spot in the Flynn Fletcher home. He opened his eyes with calm precision, blinking once before rising to his feet. The house was asleep. Every creak, every sigh of the settling walls told him so. He stretched silently and padded toward his hidden passage. It was time to begin again. His journeys each night were more than missions. They were pilgrimages across the familiar corners of Danville, a watchful survey of the lives he quietly protected. No one asked him to do this, and no one knew he did. Yet Perry felt the responsibility as surely as the moonlight guided him. To watch over the city was to care for the people who filled it, whether they knew his name or not. He emerged onto a rooftop. The city stretched wide before him. From up here, Danville was a quilt of neighborhoods stitched together by winding streets and glowing windows. Perry paused for a moment, letting the stillness settle into him. His gaze softened. This was his city, his charge, and though his presence would never be recognized, it mattered deeply that he was here. Moving swiftly but silently, Perry leapt across rooftops, surveying. In one neighborhood, he noticed the gentle flicker of a lamp still burning in a child's bedroom. Perhaps someone had fallen asleep with a book in hand. In another street, the sound of distant laughter floated from a house where family board games had run late. These small traces of life brought Perry quiet satisfaction. To him, they were reminders of why he did what he did. His path carried him toward the town square where the fountain gurgled faintly even at this hour. The benches stood empty, the shops dark. But Perry could almost hear the echoes of daytime bustle, the children chasing each other around the fountain, the vendors calling out cheerfully, the life that made Danville more than just a city. He padded softly along the edge of the square, scanning for movement. The stillness reassured him. Tonight, all was safe here. He turned next toward the park where the trees swayed gently in the night breeze. Lanterns glowed along the winding paths, their light catching the ripples of a pond at the center. Perry perched beneath a tree for a moment, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the water. It was peaceful here, but he never let his guard drop entirely. He knew that even in places of calm, surprises could rise. A strange contraption abandoned, a faint hum of machinery signs that Doofenshmirtz or some other schemer had been at work. But tonight there was nothing out of place, only the stillness of the park, breathing in harmony with the night. As Perry moved on, he thought about how much of Danville he carried with him. To others, it might just be a town on a map. To him, it was alive with stories. Every street corner had a memory. Every rooftop carried the imprint of past missions. He remembered sprinting across the train station to dismantle a stop annoying noise innator. He recalled gliding through the marketplace when Doofenshmirtz's balloon parade had gone awry. Each place held its own quiet tale of balance restored. But it wasn't just about stopping trouble. It was about the watching itself. Perry understood that guardianship wasn't only about action. It was also about presence. His silent patrols were reminders that someone cared, that even when the city slept, its safety mattered to someone. That was the essence of his calling. The clock tower struck midnight, its sound rolling gently across the rooftops. Perry paused on a ledge, ears alert, eyes steady. Midnight was a turning point, the world shifting deeper into slumber. He let the sound wash over him, another marker in his endless routine of nights. Each chime reminded him that time moved steadily, but his vigil did not waver. From here he could see the Flynn Fletcher home, standing quietly among the others. A soft glow from one upstairs window told him that perhaps someone had left a nightlight on. Perry's gaze softened. That was his anchor, the family who trusted him without knowing how far his guardianship stretched. Watching over Danville was an extension of watching over them. If the city was safe, then the children could wake to another day of carefree invention and laughter. With a final glance, Perry slipped into the shadows again, continuing his patrol. The night was long and Danville was vast. His silent watch was far from over. Perry's quiet steps carried him toward the industrial district, where the faint hum of machinery lingered even after hours. Factories stood like slumbering giants, their windows dark, their conveyor belts silent. In the daytime, these places roared with activity, powering much of Danville's inventions and daily life. But at night, they seemed almost eerie, hushed beneath the stars. Perching atop a metal tower, Perry paused, scanning the rows of buildings. He was attuned to the subtleties of the night. The flicker of a light where none should be, the faint whir of an invention left running, the irregular sound that betrayed mischief. His eyes swept over the landscape methodically, but all was still. He let the silence seep into him, a reminder that even the busiest corners of the city needed time to breathe. From here, Perry's gaze shifted toward the edges of Danville, where quiet suburban neighborhoods blended into open fields. Those borders mattered too. Trouble often came from beyond inventions, rolling out of Doofenshmirtz's tower, or peculiar experiments drifting too far. Perry knew the city was like a living organism, and he guarded not only its heart but also its edges, ensuring harmony throughout. Leaping down, he followed a side street lined with lampposts. Their lights spilled in gentle pools across the pavement, forming stepping stones through the dark. A stray cat darted across the street, pausing to peer at Perry with curious eyes. For a brief moment they regarded each other, two silent wanderers of the night. Then, with a flick of its tail, the cat disappeared into an alley, leaving Perry once again alone. He approached the river that curved through Danville. Glinting softly beneath the moonlight, the water carried reflections of the bridges above and the glow of scattered lights along the shore. Perry padded quietly along the riverbank, ears tuned to the gentle lapping of water against stone. The river was a lifeline of the city, connecting neighborhoods, drawing families to its parks during the day. At night, it became a ribbon of silver, calming in its endless flow. Standing there, Perry thought of how the city never truly stopped. Even as most of Danville slept, there were always hints of life, a baker kneading dough for the morning, a late train rolling by, the quiet whir of electricity flowing unseen. These rhythms intertwined like the threads of a lullaby, and Perry's task was to ensure the lullaby continued undisturbed. His patrol drew him toward one of his more familiar territories, Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated. The tall building jutted into the skyline, oddly out of place, yet now so deeply ingrained in the rhythm of Perry's nights. He stood at a distance watching the tower's dim windows. He could almost predict what Doofenshmirtz was doing, tinkering on some half-baked scheme, drafting blueprints with exaggerated flair, or perhaps falling asleep at his desk mid-monologue. Strangely enough, there was comfort in this routine. Doofenshmirtz's antics, for all their chaos, were a part of the city's heartbeat too. Perry didn't resent his endless inventions. In some ways, he cherished the balance they created. Without mischief, there would be no need for vigilance. Without chaos, there would be no peace to restore. Their strange dance had shaped much of what Perry's watchful nights had become. Satisfied that the tower showed no immediate signs of trouble, Perry turned away, leaping gracefully across rooftops until he reached a quieter district once more. He paused on the roof of a bookstore, looking through its window at shelves upon shelves of stories resting in the dark. The titles were unreadable from here, but Perry imagined them adventures, romances, tales of distant lands. How many readers in Danville had drifted off to sleep tonight with one of those books resting beside them? The thought warmed him. Stories, after all, were guardians, too. They watched over dreams, just as he watched over lives. As the night deepened, Perry noticed the subtle change in the air. A light fog rolled in from the river, curling around lampposts and softening the edges of the city. It blurred the sharp lines of buildings, turning Danville into something more dreamlike, almost like a painting. Perry moved through the mist with steady purpose, his teal form nearly invisible in the haze. The fog muffled sound, making the city even quieter than before. To Perry, it felt like the whole town had slipped into deeper sleep. He perched once more on a rooftop overlooking the Flynn Fletcher neighborhood. The house stood calm and still, a beacon of home among many. Candace, Phineas, and Ferb were surely asleep by now, each dreaming their own quiet dreams. Perry let the sight anchor him. Watching Danville meant watching them too. Their laughter, their curiosity, their endless inventions, all of it, was only possible because nights like this one passed without incident. The city might never know the extent of his vigilance, but Perry didn't need acknowledgement. Guardianship wasn't about recognition. It was about devotion. He breathed in the night air, soft and cool, and felt a swell of quiet pride. As long as Danville rested peacefully, his mission was fulfilled. And so, with the fog swirling around him and the moon watching from above, Perry continued his patrol. The night was still his to guard, and the city still needed his silent presence. The quiet hours stretched onward, the city now fully immersed in slumber. Midnight had passed, and the gentle rhythms of the night deepened. For Perry, this was the most delicate time, when dreams ran thick in the minds of Danville's families, when the line between stillness and vulnerability was thinnest. His watchfulness grew sharper, not because he expected trouble, but because he respected the trust of those who rested unaware. He moved toward the outskirts of town, where the suburban streets began to thin and give way to rolling hills. Here houses stood farther apart, their lights mostly extinguished, leaving the fields bathed in moonlight. Perry paused on a small rise, looking down at the twinkling spread of Danville below. From up here, the city looked fragile, almost childlike, with its rooftops like toy blocks and its winding roads like ribbons. He felt the weight of his role more profoundly in these moments, knowing how much life thrived in those quiet houses. The air was cooler here, touched with the earthy scent of grass and soil. Crickets sang softly from the fields, weaving their quiet chorus into the night. Perry tilted his head, listening. Their song blended with the faint breeze, creating a melody that seemed to reassure him. All was well. All was safe. And yet, he stayed. His presence was the final stitch in the fabric of calm. Descending back toward the city, Perry made his way through an older district where cobblestone streets wound between historic buildings. Their facades bore marks of time, their shutters slightly crooked, their chimneys worn by decades of smoke. Few people came here at night, yet Perry respected these places as deeply as he did the liveliest streets. History itself was worth guarding. He traced the outlines of buildings with his eyes, imagining the stories they had seen. Generations of families, inventions long forgotten, laughter echoing from balconies years ago. Even silence here felt rich, layered with memory. Turning a corner, Perry caught sight of a mural painted on the side of a building. The bright colors, now softened by moonlight, depicted Danville's community children playing, neighbors smiling, families gathered. He stood for a long moment in front of it, reflecting. The mural reminded him of the truth behind his nightly vigil. It was never about one mission or one adversary. It was about them, the people who filled the city with life. Protecting them meant protecting all the possibilities tomorrow could bring. Continuing onward, Perry approached the train station. Though quieter than during the day, the station still held activity. A late-night train rumbled softly, its lights glowing as it slowed to a stop. A handful of passengers stepped onto the platform, travelers returning home, others beginning journeys while the rest of the city slept. Perry watched discreetly from the shadows, ensuring their safety as they passed through. To him, every traveler was a story, and each safe arrival was part of Danville's harmony. Once the train departed, leaving only the soft hum of the tracks behind, Perry slipped away again. His patrol drew him toward the heart of the city, where skyscrapers rose higher and lights glimmered faintly from top-floor windows. A janitor worked late in one office, sweeping quietly under fluorescent lights. A security guard read a newspaper, glancing up every so often at the silent halls. Perry passed unseen, yet he acknowledged their presence with a quiet respect. They, too, were guardians in their own way, keeping the wheels of the city turning even as others rested. It was nearing 2 in the morning when Perry found himself once more near Doofenshmirtz's tower. Unlike earlier, one window glowed faintly with light. Perry crouched low, observing. Inside, Doofenshmirtz sat at a desk, scribbling furiously on a piece of paper. Beside him, a half-assembled contraption sparked faintly. Perry's muscles tensed. He was ready to intervene if necessary. But then he saw something unusual. Doofenshmirtz set his pen down, rubbed his eyes, and slumped forward, falling asleep against the desk. The sparks faded as the machine powered down, unfinished. Perry's eyes softened. He did not move closer, nor did he dismantle the half-built invention. He simply stayed for a moment, watching his longtime rival breathe deeply in sleep. In this vulnerable state, Doofenshmirtz wasn't an adversary, but another soul within Danville, resting as everyone else did. Perry gave a small nod, then slipped quietly back into the night. Balance was already restored. He leapt toward the rooftops once more, the cool air brushing against him as he moved. The stars seemed brighter now, scattered like silver dust across the sky. He paused on one rooftop to gaze upward. Though his life was rooted in missions and vigilance, he often found himself wondering about the vastness beyond. Each star seemed like another world, another story, perhaps, with guardians of their own. It reminded him that while his role was small in the scale of the universe, it was vast in the scale of Danville. That was enough. Back in the neighborhood streets, Perry lingered near a small playground. The swings swayed gently in the breeze, their chains creaking softly. In the daytime, this place was alive with laughter, children racing, parents chatting, imagination soaring. Tonight it lay empty, waiting for morning. Perry padded quietly across the sand, leaving no trace, but his mind filled with echoes of the joy this place contained. Protecting Danville meant protecting that joy. The hour grew later still, but Perry's resolve did not waver. His watch was not about endurance. It was about purpose. He breathed deeply, steady, ready for the rest of the night ahead. The night stretched toward its quietest hours. Between 2 and 4 in the morning, Danville reached a depth of stillness unlike any other. Even the hum of distant traffic grew rare, replaced by the subtle sounds of the earth itself, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the faint drip of water in alleyways, the occasional hoot of an owl echoing from the park. This was the hour when dreams were richest, when every soul seemed most at peace. Perry continued his patrol, padding across rooftops and gliding silently along fences. He visited familiar streets once more, checking them with the patience of someone who understood the value of repetition. Safety was not confirmed in a single glance. It was reaffirmed with every quiet observation. A soft light in one window reassured him. A darkened corner free of trouble confirmed it. His eyes swept methodically, yet his heart remained calm. Near the edge of town, Perry stopped at a small hill overlooking the Flynn Fletcher house. He sat quietly, tail curled around him, gazing at the home where his dual life intertwined. The house was serene, its windows glowing faintly with the warmth of rest. He knew Candace was likely dreaming of her next attempt to expose her brothers. Phineas and Ferb were probably drifting through fantastical dreamscapes, building impossible contraptions in their minds. And somewhere, a nightlight hummed gently in the dark, keeping fear at bay. Perry watched with a steady, unspoken vow. They would awaken to a safe morning. His gaze shifted outward again, toward the rest of Danville. Lights from scattered homes dotted the landscape like stars on earth, each one holding its own story, its own fragile dream. Perry's guardianship was vast, but he bore it without complaint. His devotion to the city wasn't born from duty alone, it was born from love, the kind of quiet, enduring love that doesn't need words or recognition. It was simply there, as constant as the moon. As the hours crept forward, Perry moved once more through the heart of the city. The fog had thickened, curling between buildings and muffling sound. From a rooftop, he looked down at the silent streets where lamplight glowed like small islands in a sea of mist. In the haze, the city felt even more dreamlike, as though it belonged not just to its people, but to their collective imagination. Perry breathed deeply, the cool air filling his chest, and allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He thought of the many nights he had kept this watch, nights when Doofenshmirtz's schemes had risen and fallen, nights when storms had rattled rooftops, when lights had gone out, when challenges had surged, and always after each disruption, calm had returned. Perry's role was to ensure that calm, to stitch it back together when it frayed. And now, as always, he continued that tradition in silence. Passing once more by the park, he noticed the pond's surface completely still, reflecting the moon like a perfect mirror. He crouched by the water, staring into it. His own reflection looked back at him, the teal fur, the steady eyes, and the small but powerful figure of an agent who lived in two worlds. He blinked once, letting the image ripple away. He was more than his disguise, more than the roles he played. He was a guardian, and that truth existed with or without acknowledgement. The clock tower chimed 3. Its deep tones resonated across Danville, and Perry felt the sound echo in his chest. 3 o'clock marked the transition toward dawn. Soon bakers would stir awake, streetlights would dim, and the early rhythms of life would return. Perry knew his watch was drawing closer to its end, yet he remained as vigilant as ever. He ascended once more to a high rooftop, standing tall against the fading night. From here he could see the first faint hint of light on the horizon, not yet sunrise, but a promise of it. The stars still glimmered above, but their brilliance was beginning to soften. Perry let the view settle into him, storing it away like a secret. There was something profoundly peaceful about this in-between time. The city was still asleep, yet the world was preparing to awaken. Perry stood as the bridge between the two, the silent watcher who ensured the night ended as peacefully as it had begun. Finally, he turned back toward the Flynn Fletcher home. He slipped inside, unseen, padding softly to his usual place. The house was unchanged, still wrapped in sleep. Perry curled up quietly, his watch concluded for the night. Tomorrow would bring invention, laughter, and chaos as always. But tonight had passed safely, and that was enough. He closed his eyes slowly, surrendering at last to rest. The city no longer needed his vigilance for the moment. Danville could awaken to a new day in peace, his guardian satisfied that his silent watch had been fulfilled. The first threads of dawn had not yet reached the sky. Danville remained wrapped in the velvet stillness of night, as though the world itself wanted to linger in slumber for just a little longer. Street lamps glowed faintly in the fog, their halos soft and golden, casting quiet reflections onto the empty sidewalks. The hush of the city was profound, a silence that seemed almost sacred. Inside the Flynn Fletcher home, the air was equally still. Every creak of the house had settled, every breath of its residents slowed into steady, dreaming rhythm. Phineas and Ferb slept soundly in their shared room, the remnants of ideas for tomorrow scattered across their desks in the form of sketches and scribbles. Candace dreamed fitfully, her determination carrying over into the stories her mind spun behind closed eyes. Even the family pet goldfish floated lazily in its bowl, lulled by the gentle sway of the water. And in his small, familiar corner, Perry lay awake. His patrol was complete. The city had been guarded, the night had been steady, and balance had been preserved. He let himself breathe slowly. deeply, savoring the peace that filled the house. It was not the peace of idleness, but the peace earned through quiet vigilance. He shifted slightly, curling into the comfort of his space. His eyes wandered for a moment toward the window. From here, he could see the faint outline of the rooftops beyond, touched by the silver light of the moon. The stars above were beginning their slow fade, but they still gleamed faintly, as though reluctant to leave. Perry felt their presence like companions, watching with him until he could finally let go. The night carried echoes of his journey, rooftops crossed, streets surveyed, lights observed, and the gentle heartbeat of Danville beneath it all. Each detail lingered in his memory, not as burdens, but as affirmations. He had walked the city, and the city had remained whole. There was comfort in that cycle, a rhythm that anchored him even in the quietest hours. His breathing slowed further, syncing with the rhythms of the house. The Flynn Fletcher family's rest became his own, their safety a lullaby he could finally accept. Perry's eyelids grew heavy, though he resisted for a moment, savoring the stillness before surrendering to it. Outside, a soft breeze rustled through the trees. A single leaf tapped gently against the glass of the window before continuing its descent. It was as though the night itself whispered, "Rest now. You have done enough." Perry allowed the thought to settle within him. Yes, he had done enough. Tonight had been peaceful, and tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for now, in this quiet in-between, he could release his watchfulness and embrace the rest he so rarely allowed himself. Curling tighter, Perry tucked his beak gently into his fur, his tail wrapped neatly around him, a final gesture of comfort. His breathing grew steady, matching the rhythm of those he protected. At last, he let his eyes close fully, drifting into a sleep as gentle as the night he had guarded. The city exhaled with him, its peace complete. The silence of the house deepened as Perry slipped into rest. But even in sleep, the atmosphere around him carried a gentle serenity. It was the kind of silence that did not feel empty but full, filled with the unspoken warmth of safety, the quiet harmony of lives untouched by worry. Dreams began to weave themselves around him, subtle and calm. Perry's dreams were never filled with chaos or conflict, unlike his waking hours where watchfulness and quick reflexes guided him. His dreams unfolded like gentle streams. They were reflections of the city he guarded, softened and idealized, as though his subconscious wanted to cradle Danville in comfort just as much as his vigilant self did. He dreamed of the park where lanterns glowed brighter than usual, shimmering like fireflies in the dusk. The fountain in the square sang a softer tune, its waters cascading like lullabies. The houses of Danville were cozy and aglow, their windows shining like stars fallen to earth. Everywhere he turned, he found stillness, not the tense stillness of waiting for danger, but the peaceful stillness of lives embraced by safety. In one dream, he perched atop the clock tower, the entire city spread out before him. But instead of the sharp sounds of gears and bells, he heard a deep, calming hum, as if the tower itself sang a hymn of peace. He looked across the rooftops where no mischief stirred, and for once he felt no need to leap forward, no call to act. The city simply rested, and he rested with it. In another dream, Perry walked along the riverbank. The moonlight reflected perfectly on the surface of the water, undisturbed by ripples or waves. He saw his own reflection there, but instead of the determined eyes of an agent, he saw softened ones, gentle, thoughtful, content. The river carried that reflection onward, as if carrying his care throughout the city, distributing his devotion to every corner. The dream shifted again, and this time he was in the Flynn Fletcher backyard. Phineas and Ferb sat by a small campfire, not inventing, not rushing, but simply enjoying the glow of the flames. Candace sat nearby, leaning against a chair, her usual frustrations replaced with a sleepy smile. Even Doofenshmirtz appeared at the edge of the circle, not scheming, not ranting, but humming softly with the others. It was a picture of harmony that Perry knew could never truly exist in waking life, and yet, within his dream, it felt natural. It was a reflection of what he wanted most for everyone to rest without conflict. Back in the quiet of the real world, the night pressed onward. The stars began their slow retreat, their glow dimming as dawn prepared to approach. But inside the house, time seemed to stretch differently. Perry slept deeply, the weight of responsibility lifting from him, even if just for a few hours. His rest was not just sleep. It was restoration, a vital balance to his ceaseless vigilance. Every breath he took was steady, aligned with the rhythms of the house. His heart, always so alert during the night, now beat in a calm, measured pace. In this space between duty and awakening, Perry belonged entirely to the peace he worked so hard to preserve. And the city, unknowingly, slept alongside him, grateful in its silence. The night outside grew softer still, its edges blurring as the fog began to thin. Somewhere in the distance, a bird stirred, testing its first note, before retreating back into silence. Dawn had not yet arrived, but the world was beginning to prepare, as though the earth itself was taking a deep breath before the morning. Inside, Perry remained in the heart of slumber. His dream shifted gently, carrying him through places that felt both familiar and distant. He found himself in the marketplace, but instead of bustling stalls and clamor, there was only calm. The stands were filled not with goods, but with glowing lanterns, each one flickering like a guardian light. He walked slowly between them, his footsteps making no sound. Each lantern seemed to radiate comfort, as though each represented a household in Danville resting peacefully through the night. The dream changed, and Perry stood atop a gentle hill overlooking the entire city. Danville glowed below him, not with street lamps or windows, but with a soft, golden aura, as though the city itself breathed light. He felt no need to patrol here. The city was whole, and in this dreamscape, it required no protection. Perry simply stood, allowing himself to admire the completeness of it all. It was not just safety he saw, but fulfillment, a town at rest, a town at peace. As he continued to drift deeper into rest, his mind carried him to memories of companionship. He saw Phineas and Ferb again, their inventiveness soften into playful wonder. He saw Candace laughing freely, not out of mockery, but out of joy. He even saw Isabella, Baljeet, and Buford gathered around in a circle of friendship, their voices gentle, their presence steady. These visions were not literal, but symbolic. Fragments of the bonds Perry observed each day. They were reminders that his guardianship wasn't just about structures and streets. It was about the people who filled them. The dreamscape shifted once more, and Perry found himself beside the river. This time, however, the water carried whispers, gentle tones like a lullaby, sung by the city itself. The ripples moved in rhythm with his breathing, each wave an echo of calm. Perry leaned down, listening to the water's song. Though the words were indistinct, the meaning was clear: gratitude. The city, in its own way, was thanking him for his quiet vigilance. Meanwhile, the house remained utterly still, wrapped in a cocoon of safety. The soft ticking of a clock in the hallway counted the seconds, marking time not with urgency, but with calm steadiness. The night held firm, refusing to rush into morning, as though granting Perry the gift of deeper rest. His small form remained curled, unmoving, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Beyond the Flynn-Fletcher home, Danville continued its slumber. Rooftops glistened faintly with dew, and the sky began its subtle shift from black to dark blue. Yet still the stars clung faintly overhead, reluctant to leave the stage. It was a fragile, fleeting moment, the final hours of night, where silence reigns most purely. And Perry, tucked away in comfort, embodied that same stillness. His dreams, his rest, and the quiet world outside all seemed to align. For once the guardian of Danville was simply another sleeper within it, embraced by the same peace he so often worked to defend. The night had reached its gentlest point, that delicate space where the darkness lingers but the world feels ready to awaken. Perry stirred slightly, but not from unease. His tail twitched once, his whiskers moved, and then he settled again, sighing softly in his sleep. Even in rest, he remained poised, as if his instincts were always listening, always watching, even while his mind drifted through dreams. The city outside, too, held onto its final whispers of night. The trees swayed gently, their branches brushing together in quiet rhythm. A dog barked once in the distance, but quickly hushed, as though even it felt reluctant to break the stillness. Every detail of the world seemed subdued, wrapped in a velvet layer of calm. Perry's dream carried him one last time. In this vision, he stood within a vast meadow under an endless twilight sky. Fireflies dotted the air, not as bright flares of energy, but as tiny, drifting embers, weaving patterns across the open space. In the center of the meadow was a pool, perfectly still, reflecting both the fireflies and the stars. Perry gazed into its surface, and within the ripples he saw glimpses of his life battles fought, missions completed, friendships nurtured, and bonds kept secret yet unbroken. But the reflection did not stop at the past. He saw the future, too, not specific events, but the assurance that there would always be challenges, always duties, and always moments of joy woven between them. He understood, in the quiet way only dreams could reveal, that his role was eternal yet balanced. Protection was part of him, but so was peace. The dreamscape shimmered, and Perry felt the meadow fade away, replaced by warmth. When his eyes, still closed, shifted slightly, it was not toward duty, but toward belonging. For in the depths of his slumber, he understood something simple. He was never alone. The family he lived with, the friends he guarded, and even the city that unknowingly depended on him, they were all threads in the same fabric. And Perry himself was both guardian and part of that fabric. The room around him remained utterly still. The faint glow of early dawn crept in through the curtains, painting the air with pale silver light. It touched his chair, his blanket, and the floor with the gentlest of hues, signaling that the night was beginning to close. Yet Perry did not wake. The moment held him fast, cradling him within the quiet embrace of morning's edge. And so, dreamers, we come to the close of our story. Perry the Platypus, ever watchful, ever loyal, has finally allowed himself to rest beneath the calm of the night. Just as Danville sleeps in peace, so too does its quiet guardian, wrapped in comfort and stillness. Tonight's tale has been a reminder that even the busiest hearts need rest, and that peace can be as heroic as action. As you drift into your own dreams, may you carry that same quiet assurance that the world can wait and tonight belongs to rest. So close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the calm of this peaceful night stay with you. Until we meet again, dreamers, sleep well